My name is Nora Whitfield, and the night my daughter called our home the smell of poverty. Winter moved in without asking. Lila stood in the doorway with a duffel on her shoulder, eyeliner smudged from tears she wouldn't let fall. "I can't live like this. Mom," she said, voice shaking just enough to sting. "Your house smells like poverty." Then the door slammed and the frame with her kindergarten picture leapt off the wall and shattered at my feet. I didn't chase her down the porch. I didn't beg. I picked up the photo and brushed glass from her little paper crown the way you sweep crumbs from a cake plate after the guests go home. The heater clicked on and hummed along like it always does. A cheap, faithful thing. And the living room carried the tired notes of old paint, lemon cleaner, and last night's onions. I stood very still and listened to the quiet, to my heart tripping on all the words I didn't say. Across town, she would be greeted by polished floors and a chandelier that never needed dusting because someone else always dusted it. She would smell cinnamon candles that didn't come from the discount bin, and someone would pull out a chair for her at a table where napkins matched. I imagined it for exactly one breath. Then I stopped. I turned the broken frame in my hands until the glass slipped free and the photo lay safe in my palm. Somewhere under the sting, a thought landed like a small bird. If something is going to change, let it start with me. I set the picture on the mantel, naked as a newborn. The night thinned, and when the first seam of light showed through the blinds, I made one call. When dawn found my window, the house still smelled of paint thinner and heartbreak. I stood in the kitchen with the same mug I'd used for years, chipped rim, faded roses, and let the kettle whistle longer than necessary. The silence afterward felt heavier than the sound. The chair across from me sat empty, no scarf hanging on its back, no half-drunk glass of juice beside it. I used to trip over Lila's sneakers every morning and complain, but that mess had meant life. Now the floor looked too clean, too ready to forget. I poured coffee, black and bitter, the way I drank it when I couldn't afford cream. The first sip burned my throat, but I didn't flinch. It reminded me I was still here. I looked around at the peeling wallpaper, the faded curtains that never quite matched, the uneven table legs. It wasn't poverty I smelled. It was years of trying. I pulled out an old notebook from the drawer, the one with grocery lists and overdue reminders, and wrote one sentence across a clean page. "Make this place breathe again. Under it." I scribbled what little I owned that could turn into cash. An old sofa, the dining table, maybe the china set collecting dust since before my husband died. The list looked like the bones of a past life. By 9, I called Frank Delgado, a friend who ran a secondhand shop near the trolley stop. "Frank," I said, "you still buy furniture that remembers good times?" He chuckled, a sound warm enough to thaw something small in me. "Always. You got a price in mind?" He showed up by noon in his dented blue van. Together we lifted the sofa that once held birthdays and bad news alike. "This thing's seen love," he said. I nodded, holding one end until the springs groaned their goodbye. He paid me in cash, folded the bills neatly, and didn't mention pity. When his van pulled away, the living room looked naked, but not ashamed. I stacked what money I had on the counter and counted slow, just enough for paint. Maybe a curtain if I stretched it. No miracles, but a start. I walked to the hardware store 3 blocks down, where the owner had seen me buy cleaning supplies for 2 decades. "I need color," I told him, "something that forgives." He mixed a soft white with a hint of dawn in it, called it morning light. I carried 2 gallons home, their metal handles biting into my palms. By afternoon, I had music on the old radio and the roller dripping over the first wall. The beige disappeared under new brightness. Each stroke sounded like a promise. "You're not done yet." The smell filled the room, sharp but clean, and for the first time in a long while, I opened every window to let the air move freely. When my arms started to shake, I stopped to heat a can of soup, ate it standing by the counter, and watched sunlight change on the wet paint. The house was starting to look less like something abandoned and more like something waiting. That night, I sat on the floor, leaning against the fresh wall, the kindergarten photo of Lila on my lap. Her paper crown was tilted, her smile missing a front tooth. "You'll come home one day," I whispered, "and this place will smell like courage." I pressed the photo against my chest, felt the heartbeat beneath it, and said aloud what I hadn't dared to think. If anything's going to change, it starts with me. The next morning, the paint had dried into a kind of light I hadn't seen in years. I made coffee again, same chipped mug, but the taste was softer. The walls reflected daylight, like they were proud to be seen. I stood there and thought, if a room can change with a little effort, maybe a person can too. I spent the rest of the week turning small ideas into motion. Frank came by with a smile and a folded flyer from the community college downtown. "They're running short courses again," he said. "Sewing, woodworking, small business basics. You'd like it." I laughed. "You think I've got time to play with fabric?" He shrugged. "I think you've got time to start over." The words sat in my head the rest of the day. That evening, I opened Lila's old laptop. It wheezed like an old dog but still obeyed, and searched for the class. The photo showed women about my age bent over sewing machines, their faces calm, focused, capable. The fee was small enough that if I sold the old radio, I could afford it. I hesitated only once before clicking enroll. The classroom smelled of starch and dust and second chances. The instructor, Carol, was a woman with silver hair pulled into a bun that meant business. "You're new," she said. "Let's see what your hands remember." At first, my stitches wandered like they were drunk, but Carol watched quietly until I found rhythm. "There it is," she said, her smile half approval, half warning. "Don't fight the fabric, guide it." The hum of the machine became a heartbeat. By the end of the week, I'd sewn a crooked pillowcase and felt like I'd climbed a mountain. I came home that Friday with a borrowed machine and an ache in my shoulders that felt honest. I turned Lila's old room into a workspace, moved her posters into a box, cleaned the desk, and covered it with fabric scraps. The lamp cast a yellow pool of light on the table, and in that circle, I saw a possibility. The next day, I carried a few sample pillowcases to Lois Carter across the street. She'd been my neighbor for 20 years, the kind of woman who bakes for funerals and knows everyone's business without cruelty. She touched the fabric like it was a newborn. "You made these?" she asked. I nodded. "Well," she said, "my couch could use a new mood. How about 3 in navy?" Her order was small, but it felt like the world was opening its window to me. She paid cash, $50, and said, "Spend half on supplies and half on a treat. You've earned it." I didn't buy a treat. I bought thread, zippers, and a yard of fabric that felt expensive even though it wasn't. I cut carefully, whispered measurements like prayers, and stayed up past midnight sewing. My fingers fumbled, but I refused to quit. When the first pillow came out clean and square, I laid it on the chair and smiled until my face hurt. Lois picked them up 2 days later. She pressed one against her cheek and said, "Soft, like it remembers being loved." That night, she posted a photo on Facebook with a caption, "Handmade by my wonderful neighbor Nora. Support local talent." I didn't even know she used hashtags, but by morning, 3 strangers had messaged asking about prices. I didn't know how to take online orders, so I called Lois's daughter to help me set up a small page called Home Thread by Nora. We took photos in the sunlight by the window, fabric stacked neatly beside the machine. My hands looked old in those pictures, but steady. That steadiness was the story. Orders trickled in. 2 pillows, a table runner, a set of napkins. Each sale paid for the next batch of fabric. Each message saying thank you reminded me that work done with care still mattered. On Sunday evening, I sat by the open window, the soft hum of the sewing machine filling the room. I realized I hadn't cried once that week. Maybe healing didn't sound like laughter or applause. Maybe it sounded like a needle finding its way through cloth. Steady, sure, one line at a time. By the second month, my little page had begun to hum with strangers. Some left heart emojis, some asked about shipping to other states, and one woman simply wrote, "Your story reminds me of my mother." I printed that comment and pinned it above the sewing table. It reminded me I wasn't invisible. Work grew faster than I expected. My dining room turned into a warehouse of fabrics, floral prints, solid colors, linen that wrinkled if you even looked at it wrong. I learned how to calculate costs, cut smarter, and answer messages without sounding desperate. Still, there were days when the machine stuttered like an old engine and my patience frayed along with the thread. One afternoon, a rush order came from a woman planning her daughter's engagement party. She wanted 15 cushion covers in cream and gold, nothing less than perfect. I bought new fabric and stayed up sewing until dawn. When I pressed the last piece under the iron, the steam rose blue. The gold thread bled into the cream, leaving a faint halo across the seams. I just stared, chest tight. All that work, ruined by a shade of arrogance. Mine. I considered shipping them anyway. Maybe she wouldn't notice. But when I looked at Lila's photo taped above the table, I knew better. That little girl with the paper crown would have asked, "Is this how you fix things, Mom?" So I didn't. I messaged the client, explained the mistake, refunded half her deposit, and offered to redo the order at cost. To my surprise, she called instead of writing. Her voice was firm but kind. "You owned up to it," she said. "Not many do. Keep the refund. Send me the new batch when it's ready." I hung up and cried for the first time in weeks, not from shame, but from the strange grace of being forgiven for trying. Still, the refund left my savings thin. By the next Friday, I was short on rent and groceries both. Pride didn't pay bills, so I walked into a curtain shop downtown and asked if they needed part-time help. The owner, a tall woman with coral lipstick and a tape measure around her neck, looked me over like she was assessing fabric. "You sew clean lines?" she asked. "Straighter than most things in my life," I said. She laughed, handed me a bundle of hems, and said, "Prove it." For 2 weeks, I stitched in the back of that shop from 5 in the evening to 10 at night. The hum of industrial machines drowned out the noise of worry. Each paycheck went to rent and supplies, and by month's end, I'd rebuilt what I'd lost. The day the engagement woman sent me a photo of her party, my pillow covers gleaming under fairy lights, I felt something inside me repair itself. Word spread the way kindness does, quietly, but steadily. A blogger from a local lifestyle page reached out, asking if she could feature the lady who makes comfort look elegant. She came with a camera, and I made sure the house looked like a home. We drank tea while she took photos of my hands at work. "You make every stitch look deliberate," she said. "Is it?" "Mostly," I told her. "The rest is forgiveness." That weekend, orders doubled again. I bought a new spool rack, hired a neighborhood teen to help me with packaging, and taught her how to check seams by running fingers along the edge. She reminded me of Lila at 15, eager, clumsy, but full of light. One evening, while sorting through invoices, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find an envelope slipped under the mat. Inside was a small card, Seaport Craft and Design Fair, call for local artisans. There was a handwritten note from Carol. My sewing instructor. You're ready. Nora. Apply. The deadline was a week away. I sat at the table, the house quiet except for the old clock's tick, and ran my thumb over the smooth paper. The idea of standing behind a booth, selling under bright lights, terrified me, but so had the idea of starting. I looked at my reflection in the window, hair messy, eyes older but clearer. "All right," I whispered. "Let's see how far this can go." The application took me 3 nights. I filled out every line as if it were a prayer. Business name, product description, photos, proof of tax registration. When I dropped the envelope in the post, I felt like I'd mailed a piece of my courage. A week later, the phone rang while I was hemming a curtain. "Ms. Whitfield, this is Laura Park from the Seaport Craft and Design Fair. We loved your submission. Would you like to reserve a booth for next month?" My hands shook so hard I almost stitched the wrong line. "Yes," I said, barely breathing. "Yes, I would." The next day, I marked the date on the wall calendar in bright red and started planning. The living room filled again with fabric, tags, and lists. I practiced setting up my booth in the garage, arranging pillows on shelves, testing how the banner looked in the afternoon sun. I even borrowed a card reader so people could pay without cash. Each night before bed, I rehearsed how I'd greet customers without sounding like I didn't belong there. Then, out of nowhere, came a knock at the door. When I opened it, Lila stood on the porch, hair tangled, suitcase in hand. The sight of her froze the air in my lungs. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "Can I come in?" For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I stepped aside. She walked into the house that had once embarrassed her and looked around in silence. The painted walls, the tidy shelves, the hum of the sewing machine, it all spoke for me. "It's different," she said. "It doesn't smell like paint anymore." "No," I said quietly. "It smells like work." She sat at the kitchen table and tracing the rim of her mug while I poured coffee. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "I thought I wanted something better. Evan's mother. She made it sound like money fixed everything, but that house felt like a museum. I couldn't breathe without asking permission." She laughed, small and bitter. "They called you uneducated. Mom. They said poor people make poor choices. And I didn't say a word." Her confession landed heavy between us. I wanted to be angry, but all I saw was the little girl who once drew hearts on my grocery lists. I reached across the table and touched her hand. "You don't have to explain," I said. "You just have to start over." Tears blurred her mascara. "Can I stay? Just until I figure things out?" "You can stay," I said, "but you help with orders. You clean up after yourself, and you respect this house." Her nod came fast, grateful. "Deal." That night, we worked side by side, measuring fabric, tying tags, packing boxes. I showed her how to fold without creasing the seams, how to double-check invoices. She listened, quiet and serious, like a student who didn't want to waste a second chance. Later, when she went to bed, I stood in the hallway looking at the closed door to her room, our old battles now stitched into peace. The house no longer echoed. It breathed again. I thought about the fair, about facing strangers who might judge or ignore me, and felt the old nerves stir. Then I heard Lila's soft snore through the wall and smiled. Fear felt smaller with her home. Maybe that's what healing was, not forgetting who hurt you, but letting them walk back through the door and finding that you've both changed. The morning of the fair arrived with the smell of salt from the bay. Lila woke before sunrise to help me load the car, boxes stacked neatly, a folding table tied with rope. The banner rolled tight in its tube. She brewed coffee while I double-checked my inventory, counting each pillow and runner like blessings. The nervousness in my stomach felt a lot like hope wearing a different name. The Seaport Craft and Design Fair spread across the pier, white tents glowing under the early light, booths lined up like pages in a story, woodworkers, candle makers, potters, painters. When we found our spot, number 42, it faced the water. The breeze lifted the corners of my tablecloth as if to say, "Let's begin." Setting up took an hour. Lila adjusted the shelves while I arranged the display, navy cushions, linen runners, and one small sign that read, "Handcrafted with quiet strength." People passed by, smiling politely, but few stopped. My hands trembled each time I reached for my water bottle. "Give it time," Lila whispered. "They'll come." By noon, the fair buzzed with music and chatter. Children ran with cotton candy. Couples carried paper bags filled with other people's dreams. A few customers drifted to our booth, touching fabric, asking prices, nodding before walking away. My confidence began to fray. Then a woman in a linen dress stopped and ran her fingers along a seam. "Did you sew this yourself?" she asked. I nodded. "It's rare to see handwork this even," she said. "I'm Laura Park, curator for the Gas Lamp Makers Collective. We're looking for local artisans for our next showcase. Would you be interested?" My mouth went dry. "I'd be honored." I managed. She smiled, examining another piece. "Your work has honesty. That's harder to find than talent. Come by next week. We'll discuss details." She handed me her card, embossed and simple, before disappearing into the crowd. Lila grabbed my arm. "Mom, do you know who she is?" I shook my head. "She's the woman who curates half the boutique stores in downtown San Diego. You did it." Her excitement made me laugh for the first time that day. We stayed until sunset, our booth empty except for one sample pillow we kept as a reminder. I packed the boxes slowly, savoring the weight of the day. On the drive home, the car smelled of fabric and French fries, and Lila hummed along to the radio. For the first time in a long time, the silence between us felt comfortable. A week later, we met Laura at her studio. The space smelled of cedar and ambition. She offered me a small consignment contract, nothing grand but real. 10 pieces to start, displayed beside other local artists. "You'll be part of our fall collection," she said. "People need stories like yours." After she left, Lila and I stood in the middle of the workshop, quiet. "You proud of me, kiddo?" I asked. She nodded. "I'm proud of us," she said. Months passed, and Home Thread by Nora grew steady. Not viral, not loud, but solid. Orders came in from tourists who'd seen the exhibit, from locals who liked things made with care. I hired 2 women from the neighborhood to help me sew, both mothers trying to start over in their own ways. The house filled with laughter and the soft rhythm of machines. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found the broken picture frame from that night months ago. I'd kept it in a drawer without glass, afraid to throw it away. I took it to a shop downtown, had the photo reframed properly, the cracks replaced by clarity. When I hung it back on the wall above the mantel, Lila walked in. "That picture again?" she teased. I smiled. "It's where it belongs." She studied it, then slipped an arm around my shoulders. "You know," she said, "the house doesn't smell like poverty anymore." "No," I answered. "It smells like fresh coffee and a second chance." We stood there a long moment, 2 women in a small house that had learned to be proud of itself. Outside, the sun hit the new paint just right, turning the walls the color of morning. And I thought, maybe forgiveness has a scent after all.